Hello and welcome, everyone. This is the January 30th, 2021 Complexity Weekend Heartbeat. We're really excited that you're tuning in to our live stream, whether live or in replay. We're going to play a 25-minute song by one of our awesome facilitators, Michael Garfield. And then we're going to meet you right back here in 25 minutes for the rest of the live stream, which will feature some conversations about Complexity Weekend, some facilitator visits, and an interactive Jamboard with all the participants who want to. So again, we're going to do a 25-minute Michael Garfield song, and then we'll meet you right back here for the rest of the live stream. See you soon. Hello and welcome everyone to the January 30th, 2021 Complexity Weekend Heartbeat event. Thanks so much for attending live any way that you can, watching it, and today's going to be a great day. So I'm Daniel Friedman. I'm one of the co-organizers for today's event, and I am here with Sean. Hi, Sean. Up. The live stream could hear me, but hi. Welcome.
Hi,
Sean.
Hi, I'm Sean. I'm sure Dan introduced himself. I'm also one of your organizers for this Heartbeat.
Awesome. Well, let's go through the slides that we have here, Sean, in this first part of the live stream. So today in the introductory section of this live stream, which is kind of the tip of the iceberg, the opening up of our Heartbeat event, there's two main sections, and you can check out the slides in the program just where all the other links are. In the first part of this video, we're going to talk a little bit about the Complexity Weekend community of practice, because around half of you are attending your first event. So thanks so much for stepping up and coming to our event. And then in the second half of the introductory section, we'll talk a little bit about the who, what, why, where, when, how of today's event. How can you participate? So welcome to the Complexity Weekend community of practice. Just like all complex systems, it's important to understand the initial conditions and the history and development of Complexity Weekend. So Complexity Weekend, our first event was in person in San Francisco. This picture here on the left in May 2019. And during the planning process for what we thought was going to be our second in-person hackathon, we started moving more towards online for a few reasons that are indicated on the slide. And also, as we developed and put on a second hackathon in October 2020, we started to come to a deeper understanding of the community of practice idea and on the importance of having something that was more tightly integrated across events. And also, we started putting on these Heartbeat events. So the 10 months per year that don't have weekends, we can do Heartbeat events that are smaller. They're great introductory points for people who aren't sure if they want to commit to an entire weekend or more, and also just a chance for people who have been in previous events to get to see each other and hang out. So as noted on the slide, we've had a bunch of facilitators, participants, and teams, which we'll talk more about soon. But anything you'd want to add on that, Sean?
I think the only thing I'd add is this transition to kind of online events. I think it's actually for the better, because after we did that, there's a lot more global participation. And one of the things that will kind of drive home in this initial presentation is just how important diversity is to the teams that form in our community of practice, to the interactions you have, and just opening it up to a complete global participation has really enhanced that aspect of understanding complexity together.
Yep. Thanks. I agree. So let's talk about what roles are existing in our community. The biggest green circle here on the left is participants. Everybody, in a sense, is a participant in our community of practice. That's the big takeaway here. But we also have roles that, for periods of time, people can play for specific events. So we're all here as community members, and then for a certain event, somebody might be an organizer. That's somebody who is doing the logistics, sending the emails, and preparing the structure for the emergence that the participants engage in. We also have facilitators, who are awesome complexity experts from a wide variety of backgrounds and all over the world, who help, again, facilitate and mentor and guide the teams of participants through their own complexity journey. We have associates and supporters who, in their own ways, help the community of practice survive and thrive through financial or non-financial mechanisms. And then on the bottom, we've indicated our two main on-ramps for participants. On the right, we have the biannual weekend cohorts. We can even just delete the hackathon live. And these biannual weekend cohorts, of which we had May and October last year, and we'll have May and November in 2021, these are these high energy intervals that we'll come back to in a second. But today we're here on the left side with our monthly heartbeats. So if you're here, you're a participant, and we're really excited to have you around. And these roles that are within the community are, again, something that's fluid. Everyone's a participant first, and then the roles are something that is emerging on a need to get it done basis for a certain event. And we do use Keybase as currently our text and file sharing backend at the team complexweekend.public, but we don't require or rely too heavily on Keybase for the Heartbeat events, which are really just about this live stream, the program spreadsheet, and the gather space, which we'll be talking more about. Anything you'd want to add here, Sean?
I think the other thing maybe would be, if this is your first experience at all with the Complexity Weekend community of practice, and this is your first Heartbeat, your first event in general, this is kind of a lot to take in, this structure kind of to the community. So I would just focus today on just getting to know people, learning how the interactions kind of go, like what we're all kind of showing up for, our values. And then if any of these other roles kind of strike you as interesting, then don't, just reach out to complexityweekend@gmail.com or anyone in the community and say, hey, I might want to be a facilitator. How can I go about doing that? Or I might want to be an organizer. How can I go about doing that? It's a completely flat structure. Anyone can be any of these roles. It's just a matter of your commitment in terms of time, dedication, and to the values of our community.
Thanks. So complexity, one of our key themes, is about multiple representations and through space, through time, across perspectives. So let's look at another more temporally changing look at our community. So here we have community growth and renewal. And on the implicit y-axis, it's kind of like energy or excitement. And we have in this green line, the community energy trace. And the October 2020 weekend and then the upcoming May 2021 weekend are these high energy peaks when we have a large number of people for a synchronous weekend, and there's a large pre-weekend and post-weekend focus so that we can have these diverse teams that succeed in the long run through mentorship and facilitation. So that's the high energy of the weekends. And then we have these smaller bumps on a monthly basis. These are our Heartbeat events, which you're at right now. Even if you're listening in replay, it's always January 2021 Heartbeat somewhere. Today, we're right here with a red arrow. And so that's the January 2021 Heartbeat. And then in the background is this yellow line, which is the development and the complexity journey of you and your team, because it's a community of practice, which means at multi-scale, across multiple scales. So you, relationships, your small teams and projects, as well as broader networks. It's about the work and the impact that's being realized by these teams. And then the community is like a container or an incubator or a collider where that space can be held. And so you can see we're looking into deep time. We intend to have this rhythm of 2 weekends and 10 heartbeats per year forever. So hopefully this is something that can reduce people's uncertainty about when things are happening and what the sort of broad logistical strokes are, so that we can really get creative and innovative and participatory in each event and give it the maximal flexibility for an organizer who wants to say, yeah, actually, I want to do March 2021 and I want to do this kind of event. It's like, great, then let's work with you in the weeks leading up to it so that we can actually make that happen. So I love this slide. Sean, anything else you'd want to say about this one?
I think 2 things I want to point out. One of them is, it says you and your team. The team kind of generation process, that's kind of the highest energy peaks of October and May, where we really focus on new team formation in our community. The heartbeats themselves, it's not so much focused on teams. You can come, with affiliations to a team, either one created at a Complexity Weekend event or otherwise, and we fully support it. We'll create co-working spaces for you and gather, which we'll talk about. But also, if it's just you and you don't have a team, don't worry about it. Just focus on your individual complexity journey. And if you want to join a team at some point, that's awesome. If you want to just remain an individual and learn more about complexity over time and get to know people, that is totally awesome. So that's one point. And then the other point at the bottom, you can see we're already ready to start organizing the February Heartbeat. So if anyone out there watching this is interested in being a co-organizer and helping us do that, definitely email complexityweekend@gmail.com and we'll get going. One thing I will say about our organizing philosophy is it's a lot of work up front. So if you're going to commit to organizing a Heartbeat, it's basically a month of ahead of time of some weekly calls and some async work. So we want to make sure you understand that it's an early commitment because it makes the event flow so much better when you start early.
We plan early, plan often, just like chess, castle early, castle often. And then that helps it be very relaxed and accessible because there's so many things that can happen last minute. It's just easier to work up front. One of the reasons why it's important to work upfront and hopefully in a transparent way is that we really do have global participation. So this is some of the registration data from our October 2020 weekend cohort, which had 100 participants and a couple dozen facilitators. And we had over 35 countries represented truly from all time zones. So this is not just one of our values and most cherished components of our community of practice. It's something that's essential to our survival. And that's why we pick time zones that are maybe strange for one group of people or for one night, wake, sleep preference. It's all good because we're coming from all over the world. And so that's why we opt in when we can, we participate live when we can, and then we just don't worry too much when we can't. What would you say about the global attributes before we move forward?
I think, and again, just talking about teams a little bit in the broader context of our community of practice, this actually creates a very interesting team dynamic where you have people all over the world and you have to think about working a little bit differently. We're very synchronous and asynchronous at different times. Synchronous when you might need to have like a team meeting or just an event like a Heartbeat to get to, to hang out with everyone in the community, and heavily lean on asynchronous, such as using Keybase like we do in our community of practice, to, in this case, engage people from all over the globe working on something together. We are a community of practice. We try to do things and practice what we learn about complexity science. And it's just this whole global kind of participation dynamic leads to this very interesting situation where, you might be heading to bed and someone on your team or in the community that you're engaging with is just waking up. So kind of learning those patterns is something that you'll get more familiar with as you kind of experience this unique kind of remote working culture of our community of practice.
Cool. So what kind of collective wisdom can people expect to tap into and contribute to? Again, drawing a word cloud from our October 2020 cohort. So we'll have new word clouds for future cohorts. We see skills and perspectives that are truly all over the map on every dimension, from the qualitative to the quantitative, from the theoretical to the translational and applied, and from really the abstract and the studious aspects of complexity to the applied complexity and the lived experience, and all of these ways which we come to know and be excited about complexity. So just looking at this list, I know, Sean, you have always so much to say about these words and terms, but I just look at it and think this is kind of like the soup that we can dip into and participate in. What do you think about it?
I think the thing I like to stress about these word clouds, which are really interesting in our community, is like, yes, there are large words, like complex problems, machine learning, physics. There are, Python. There's certain things that are kind of staples in some sense, but those aren't really the most interesting things about our community. It's really exploring the tails of the distribution and kind of and creating edges amongst those kind of tails. So if you look a little closer, and you can see things like human social system, right? Social network theory, human programmable interface, right? Science C tools, like just cool things that if you can connect those things up, that creates really interesting, innovative solutions rather than seeing the biggest words and kind of focusing on the average. That's not really what we do here. We really don't focus on the average so much as the long tail.
Yep. Just connecting. Let's do an open source project related to a garden of attention, which is going to need someone who does user interface design. It's like, all right, well, we're going on that then. So pretty cool. And it's not just about the skills, ideas, and perspectives, because it's also about complexity science as an approach. And that means everybody coming from a different background with their own experiences they bring to the table. And so this question, again, from the October 2020 cohort, was asking, what is your background or level of familiarity with complexity science? And I'll just show this word cloud, which emphasizes that we have individuals with background across sectors, from academia, government, medical, design, nonprofit. And then also I'll just briefly show, before Sean can comment on both, this is from this Heartbeats cohort of 62 responses. And people were asked, what is your level of familiarity with complexity or complexity science? From 1 being less familiar to 7 being more familiar. So not expert, there's no credential, there's no certification, there's no degree, there's no single way to do it. It's a self-assessment. And we see 1 through 7 all represented. So Sean, looking at the word cloud and this histogram, what do you see and what is important about that?
I think one of the things that's most enjoyable, I think, about this community of practice is, in my experience at least, every time I interact with somebody, it's a completely different perspective. It's a completely different starting point, end point, like background, skill set. And so I'm just constantly learning all the time. So that's kind of an important mindset. Oh, hey, Richard.
Hey, Richard.
That's kind of an important mindset to kind of get into, which is, that beginner's mindset, right? Nobody's an expert in complexity, and just too broad. It encompasses, some aspect of every field out there. And so just going in with that beginner's mindset and really being open to learning through these interactions is, I think, going to set you up for the most success in this community.
Awesome. Let's move forward. And then in 15 minutes, we'll be talking more to Richard. So Richard, you could chill in here, especially if you actually wanted to say anything, or no worries if not. Let's talk about what brings us all together with our regime of attention synchronized on this live stream and this event. I'll just read these three, and then Sean, feel free to add anything. What brings us together is that we have a shared purpose and interest in complexity science, and we have a desire to have impact through co-creative teams and improve our community through feedback and participation. So it's learning by doing. And also we're brought together and synchronized and coordinated, even though we're a loose swarm in other respects, we're brought together by our core values and the following of community guidelines. What does that speak to you about, Sean?
I'll start with the third bullet. And so, the way that our kind of organizing philosophy is for this whole community is, we treat the Complexity Weekend community practice as a complex system. And so everything we learn as we interact with everyone about complexity in various domains, we try to think about and process and apply to the way the community is organized. And so focusing on things like core values, kind of a constitution of some sort of our mission purpose, and boiling that down, not just to values, but like, how can I as a participant kind of follow guidelines that match the values? That's kind of in line with complexity thinking. Whereas, we have a kind of a macro feeding into the micro interactions, and the micro interactions can emerge up and affect the macro again, because those documents are editable, right? We're totally open. There's a feedback loop between both sides. And so that's kind of the approach in general taken to kind of running these events and helping our community grow. So I can't stress enough how important those core values are, and understanding them and interacting with them in mind.
Great. So our collective purpose can be pithily summarized as: we learn complexity science by doing, we serve through deep time, and we include to innovate. Diversity is key. And this is an evolving and developing list that gets realized through our core values here. And again, I'm going to read through them. And then Sean, maybe if you want to just highlight one or two just that you're feeling moved by today. Complexity Weekend is itself a complex system, always complexity first. Education is active. We learn complexity science by doing. We repeat, repetition is beautiful, repetition is beautiful. Teamwork makes the dream work. Participation means accessibility and inclusion for all. Respect is key. Step up and be brave. And it's great that everyone is participating in their own way. What does that strike you as today, Sean?
There's so much to unpack. I'll pick one for now. If you've seen multiple of these organizer videos, you've seen us go into all of these in various times. But the one I really want to stress this time is the bottommost one, which is relatively new. And it's this idea that, any way in which somebody wants to participate in our community of practice is awesome. There is no better or worse way to participate. Just engage in the way that's best for you. And one aspect of this that we really want to stress, you might have heard this before, but it's called no FOMO, or no fear of missing out. And something that we're trying new with this Heartbeat is, you might notice if you've been at previous Heartbeats, is that we've extended the time window for the Heartbeat event, and we've explicitly told everyone, like, you don't have to be here the whole time. Be here for when it is best for you. And we tried to move the time so that we can incorporate more time zones. This is pretty early Pacific time. If people are participating for Pacific time, they're probably not here yet. But it's okay. Drop in whenever you're ready. Leave whenever you need to. And it's important to not have this fear that you're going to miss out on things, or that I'm gonna be disruptive if I kind of join after I have to put the kids down, or anything like that. Just show up when you can, and be, as long as you are fully present when you're present. That's kind of the key.
Nice. And to that end, we try to centralize and simplify our links. We have a single source of truth program. You're invited to a calendar event that has all of the information in there. And then whenever you're available for synchronous interactions, there will be other people there too. Let's talk about our participation guidelines. Oh, and thanks, Richard. You said, and have fun in the Jitsi chat. I agree. It's definitely, it should be across all of the slides. Our participation guidelines, and then we'll switch over to talking in the last 10 minutes of this section a little bit more in detail about how to participate today. Our participation guidelines are the team and individual and all scales of analysis is a complex system. So we adopt a complexity thinking mindset in light of these challenges and opportunities. Communication is key, relationships and teams. Embrace technology, but know its limits, and to the extent possible, use audio and visual and interpersonal etiquette. Full participation, again, in light of whatever that means to you. Reach out on the edges and stay involved. So the real tapestry of community is about the edges and the relationships that you form. It's not about how closely you're listening to this live stream, or even if you listen to this live stream, it's about the edges that connect our community participants. What else would you add on these guidelines? Or you can weave these into describing the next section, Sean.
Sure. I think the one I'll pick this time is communication is key, relations and teams. So just going back to this idea that we are a community of practice, we don't just talk about complexity science. We try to practice it. We try to learn by doing and applying the theories. And so just talking about teams in that context, one interesting thing about our weekend events is that it's not, we actually have removed, you saw Dan do it live, we've removed kind of the term hackathon from it because that has certain connotations to previous event structures. And it's our event is not like that. It's we don't expect everyone to have a prototype at the end of the weekend or to really rush to a solution with people. We actually are focused on having teams develop long-term thinking together, that deep time value we're talking about, having them really focus on the communication between the team members, creating the most diverse team possible, which requires a lot of infrastructure to make it work. Diversity is not an easy thing to have. You have to really want it and strive to make it possible. And so communication and respect and all these other aspects go into making a team really work well. Hey, Kyrie.
Nice.
Richard, Kyrie, you guys are at perfect timing because in 2 slides, I'm going to introduce you guys so you guys can introduce yourselves.
we have the most eager and fun facilitators today.
Well, that's all I wanted to say about participation guidelines. Let me hop into the next section and then we can have the facilitators introduce themselves.
Great. So in this section, we're going to be talking about the who, what, why, where, when, how of today's January 30th, 2021 Heartbeat. So we're on the organizer slide. Sean, continue.
Yeah, you guys can put your videos on. This will be fun. We'll engage in these last slides. So this is the January 20th or 2021 Heartbeat. Like I was saying, this is from 6 a.m. to 12 p.m. Pacific time, which is an experiment we're doing this time. We're trying to open the window up to get more time zones in and really stressing that new value of no fear of missing out. Be here when you can be here, leave when you need to leave, and just be fully present when you're here. And so really quickly, Dan and I helped organize this one. If you're interested in co-organizing another one, such as February coming up, let's start immediately. Let's do it early. Organize early and make it easy on us. And email complexityweekend@gmail.com if you're interested in that. And just to quickly highlight our amazing facilitators for this Heartbeat, right? We've got Denise and Richard who've been here at previous Complexity Weekend events. If you've been to one, you probably recognize them. And Kyrie and Deborah, who are new. Please, do you guys want to introduce yourselves? Maybe Richard, then Kyrie?
Yep. Richard, and then Kyrie, do you want to go for it? And then we'll continue with these fun slides.
Oh, you're muted, Rich.
And now you're muted, so unmute and just reload the page while we go to Kyrie first.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Hi, everybody. I'm Kyrie. I'm a professor at the University of Colorado Boulder. And Sean initially told me about Complexity Weekend, and I started reading about complexity, and it really made an analogy to the power grid. So I was interested in seeing how, we could brainstorm some ways that complexity science could be applied to energy, which hopefully is pretty interesting.
Cool. And
thanks for having me.
Thank you. And we're going to be talking more at 7:15 Pacific. So we'll welcome you back. You can rejoin this room right then, and we'll say hi again. So thanks for introducing yourself. And then, Richard, we still don't hear you. So why don't you try random things for the next 5 minutes? And then once we hear you, we'll hear you.
Nice.
Yep. And
We're getting all the audio visual worked out. I love it.
Yep. So, yep.
Everything's live with Complexity Weekend. That's
Yep.
everyone.
We don't have any, exactly. So again, we have 4 awesome facilitators, and the kinds of things that facilitators tend to do are interactive sessions, appear on live streams through audio and or visual, and do office hours, which are kind of like informal times just to hang out and really connect with these individuals. And each of these different facilitators are going to be engaged in different aspects of that. And the single source of truth is in the spreadsheet. So if you go to the program spreadsheet, you'll see what time you can go into the opt-in interactive session and which times you could go to their office hours. And also, if it's in Gather, so the spatial chat platform, which we're going to talk about in a second, that means it's going to be interactive. So just keep that in mind. You're not attending a seminar or a talk. These are going to be facilitated sessions. So continue, Sean. But thanks to all the facilitators for their awesome work leading up to the event and during and after as well.
Totally. So just kind of moving on from there, Dan mentioned the program. The program is really essential to every single event that we do at Complexity Weekend. It is the single source of truth. So everyone across all these global time zones can coordinate and just look at one document to kind of know what's going on. So one thing I want to stress is these are the 61 responses for this particular Heartbeat RSVPs. You can see the distribution of what past Complexity Weekend events people have engaged in. And you can see that by far the largest categories have never attended a Complexity Weekend event. So if you're new and you're watching this, you're not alone. You're the majority. And this is all just a learning process for everyone. So I want to stress that. And then also, if you go to the bit.ly, that goes straight to the program. I added actually a tab earlier today, which just has some of the RSVP questions related to how people define complexity and what they're kind of interested in doing during the Heartbeat. So that's really interesting stuff. It's all anonymized, but go check it out if you're just kind of curious about this particular Heartbeat cohort and what people are into. Richard, I heard your mic, so I think you're live. You want to say hi?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yep. Amazing. Yep. Fiber wire broadband, and I can't get it connected. It's because I decided to try and jump over to Chrome. I do. Hi guys, it's great to be back. I do feel that I need to have some funky art in the background.
You
Is
got a
that to
plant.
kind of wake?
You have a nice plant.
I've got 2 plants and a shell.
It's the new bookshelf.
Yeah, exactly. I should just put a picture of a bookshelf with all really the wrong types of books. Yeah. So, good morning. You both look well. Dan, you look like you've slept in your office, or
I will not confirm
things.
or deny that.
Well, if you've got taps like that you get in a lab in your home, that's quite cool or worrying. I don't know which way to go, but we can work that out over the next couple of hours. So yeah, I'm based in the UK, and I'm going to be talking about the complexity of nature, but focusing on how can we look at these models, whether it's biological processes, into functions, systems, into trade-offs, and actually explore this. So today we're going to be playing around on Miro, actually looking at food webs and how researchers are looking at studying the flows of energy in a food web to actually then look at eco-industrial parks or infrastructure, even digital infrastructure. So we'll be going back to high school, junior school ecology to actually watch some videos, but then starting playing around by doing that. And join the session, the warm-ups, making your own monster in Miro. So we might just end up not doing any ecology and making monsters in Miro.
That sounds fun. Let's do Sean. Richard, stay on. Sean,
Sure.
How about you run through Gather for 2 minutes, because that's the how of these different events that we're going to be doing. And then Richard, we're going to go from the 30 to the 40 with we'll talk a little bit more about the biomimicry and what kind of an interactive session that people can look forward to. So here we go with the Community Tech Gather.
Okay, that sounds good. And one thing I want to mention just about what Richard said is he mentioned a Miro board, and that is in the program. So it is the single source of truth. You'll see in the row with Richard's session, there's a link to Miro right there.
Yep,
23. So moving on to the kind of technology and everything. So Gather is going to be, this is a live stream. You're probably watching this on YouTube. That's this first portion of the Heartbeat. The majority of the event is happening in this platform called Gather. And Gather is this really interesting kind of spatial video chat platform. It's really fun if you haven't used it before. Hop in the space now. It's in the program and just check it out. But basically, you're going to be walking around as a little avatar, and when you get close to anyone, you're going to have a video call. And it's very fluid, and it's organic. It feels like you're in person, which for a lot of people in various countries, they're not experiencing right now. So that'll be really nice. And if you have any questions, just email complexityweekend@gmail.com, and we'll make sure you get onboarded and everything works. It's got all the typical video sharing functionality, including a chat on the left. And actually, could you advance the slide, Dan? I just want to show an overview of our space. This is the same Gather space we use every month for every Heartbeat. And it's got some key features. All the live sessions are going to be up toward the north. If you go through that door, that's where the live sessions are going to occur. In the center, there's a podium, and that's where the lightning talks are going to occur. When you're at the podium in Gather, everyone in the room can hear you. And around the perimeter, you can see these co-working spaces. And so right now, there's a couple of people who wanted posters and are going to have their teams present in the co-working spaces. When you're in that rug, it's private. So it's just like a little private space, but you can engage with people, by walking out to the side or near the posters. A lot of these co-working spaces today are open. So if you are actually interested in taking one of them, just let Dan know. He'll go and change the name. It'll be your co-working space for now. And you can start working. We are very much into co-working, which is, public facing working. So, you can sit and have a team meeting and then be nearby someone else working on their stuff. And you can go and talk at the water cooler, and get to know each other. And so that's kind of the culture we're trying to create in this space. It's kind of a public co-working space on Gather, always online, 24/7, even after this event. And those are kind of the main things. Dan, is there anything I'm missing on the Gather space?
Just that the co-working spaces are using this like customized build function in Gather, so we can do it live or we can prepare more in advance. But Gather is something that we will all come to know and love. So let's just go to the program before we hand it over to Richard.
Yep. So here's just a quick screenshot of the single source of truth for this event. You can see it's got all the different times. All of them are in PST, so you might have to convert it to your time zone. But that's when things are happening, what it is, a description, any URLs you might need. And you can see everything after a certain point is in Gather, right? It's just YouTube for a little bit and then Gather. So the last thing I'll point out is that feedback form at the bottom in the bright green, that is really essential. We use that feedback every single time to improve the event for the whole community. So just really make sure you fill out that survey before you disengage, whenever that happens to be. So Dan, why don't you do the last slide? Take it away.
Yep. Just as a point of process, your feedback through the form and also your word of mouth recommendations are the best way for our community of practice to grow and are really infinitely valuable to us. And then if you want to get in touch about supporting in some other way through fiat currencies or cryptocurrencies, then those contributions go towards the costs of Gather bandwidth for these events, as well as facilitator honorariums, scholarships, microgrants, a few other things that we've been thinking about and working and iterating on. So it's used hopefully well because we're a lean and a volunteer-driven effort. So there, again, we're looking at the program. And now, before we head into the Jamboard in about 10 minutes, Richard, I'm going to just center our view with the video. And how goes it? What is new in complexity and biomimicry today? Thanks again for being a facilitator. It's so cool. Yes.
Well, I think we're in lockdown 75 in the UK. We're actually ahead of the Fast and the Furious films now with the way we name them. If anyone's seen that memes going around. So I put in the chat there, hugs, remember them, because we're only allowed out for an hour a day. And this is going on till the 8th of February. So what's new with me? I'm saving money, not buying business cards because I'm not seeing anyone. Understanding that I hate living in Flatland, which is working on the computer. But complexity-wise, we have been busy building up a huge research database of people working in biomimicry in the UK. So we've identified 1,800 people. We're now cataloging that and building a ontology to kind of classify them and then into a knowledge graph so we can start building partners. Because we found there's a gap in the market with an investor to actually invest in startups. Unlike America, where the risk profile is a lot less, VCs will chuck money. We've got smaller economies of scale, but there's a lot of knowledge there, and we're looking at helping them get to market. So I've spent most of my time since the last time we staring at spreadsheets, but also understanding that there's so many people out there working in mathematics, biology, computer science, into material science, they're all kind of doing the same thing. So going back to what you were saying when the introduction is, I almost see complexity science as about, you've got to be an interdisciplinary designer. And if anyone's read a book called Range by David Epstein, I'd highly recommend it, because he talks about how Nintendo got successful because the guy was it's looking outside the box. It's not always the most complex solution, but it's about attaching the things together. And one of the key things that we're going to be doing in my session is actually understanding what the problem is. So mapping it out, because that is, if you guys from doing PhDs and that, and the whole half your PhD and half your research is understand where your problem is. Because if you just rush in to something, you end up solving something completely wrong. You have to go back to the beginning. So it's about, we're going to be looking at a food web, not food chains, and actually understand what eats what cannibalizes what. We could look in as much detail as we want, and then start thinking, well, that's flows of energy, information there. And that's why we can start looking at, right, cities, factories, other types of infrastructure. And you can actually start, I doubt we'll get there into our session, but we can start looking at how this matches up. And you start seeing flows. Where can you actually minimize the waste? Where's the places, say, in your supply chain, you can start thinking, well, actually, this could be replaced by that. And it starts building up this map, thinking about sustainability and the life cycle. And because you're actually studying processes, you're actually looking at things how change and changes over time. So you can even start thinking, yes, there's a one-way thing where things eat plants, but then you start thinking, say, tomato plants, they actually kill flies and other bugs, and then the flies then fall down to the ground and they get absorbed into the soil and eating, and that provides nutrients for the tomatoes. And then you start thinking about, well, how complex do you want to go? I'm sure there's ecologists who would start saying, right, you look at a food web of what you can see when you go out for a walk, but what about the soil food web as well? And then starts thinking and going all the way down to the bacteria. And you can literally create a food web just by looking at compost in your garden. So it's a case of, you can actually start then looking at for simpler parts in the process to think, because one of the things that I've been doing a lot is when you speak to manufacturing companies, they'd love to invent new ways to make things, but changing one part of the process in the factory floor can cause untold cataclysmic failures, because you might not know somebody can fix it. You might not know how it's going to work with another part of the machines. You might not know it shorts out the system. But if you look around at the waste streams, and I'm sure everybody's been past parts of countries where they live, they've seen all these waste plumes coming out or the water coming out of factories. If you can just knowing how much that can be diverted to somewhere else and the energy saved. And for me, that's a good way by looking at kind of the bigger system. So it's taking in systems thinking, bits of ecology that you're going back all to, high school, junior school, but then just start thinking about how they're connected. We've done all these things where you tie things up with string, but how does that edge, not just what does it do? If you're working kind of a knowledge graph, ontology basis things, but actually what's the figures that you can put in there? And then that's where you can start building out these matrices and go very much more complex. So you can start off very simple. And that, for me, I think it would be useful for everybody from a designer to a computer scientist to get involved with that, because this is where you bring them all together. And it's almost tapping into this kind of, childhood thing of going out in your class and exploring, what's in your back garden or backyard or in the field next to the school.
Wow. You brought up so many great points about how our networks and teams and projects have to be interdisciplinary, because reality transcends discipline as well. And so we do need that conversation across all those different domains. And then you brought up Flatland, and yes, we're definitely in the screen world, but then it's like that contrast allowed you and others to work on this graph embedding that helps us understand our social networks, our resource dependencies, our environmental impacts in this novel way, where maybe there wasn't as much attention or emphasis or necessity realized. It's like, oh, we're meeting in person. Oh, there's the biomimicry club in London. It's all good. And then now it's like, whoa, we need to have a better structure for all reasons that you're mentioning. So thanks for sharing. That was really awesome. Sean?
Sure.
I actually had a question just while you were talking. One thing we also stress in the complexity weekend community practice is, not interdisciplinary for sure, but also just the very different approach to problem solving. And I'm just curious, for biomimicry as a form of problem solving, an approach to problem solving, what are some of the downsides of biomimicry? Like, what are some ways in which natural systems or biological or ecosystems, like they're not efficient solutions? Like, I'm just thinking of, I used to have a lot of fruiting trees in my past house, and you would just see half-eaten apples on the ground, like just one bite out, thrown on the ground. And it's like, is that the most efficient way to produce food and feed a bunch of animals? Where are cases where biomimicry may not be the best approach, or needs to have other approaches with it to do the best job?
Yeah, I think it's actually down to the tools. You get a lot of people fixating on tools, and one of the things we're doing for the international standards, ISO, is actually looking at how do you problem solve. And one of the things is actually doing this, looking at instead of putting a biologically design table, it's how does a designer work with an ecologist or a computer scientist, systematic way of looking at things. So you can actually, yes, there's imperfections there, but when you look at a bigger system, I'm not going to say redundancy, because is there such a thing as redundancy in nature, or is it something that's needed to keep the system going? I've been speaking to guys working computing AI, and when you get a program going, most of the code, once the system starts learning, is effectively not needed anymore, but it's needed to get the system going. So you could say that the same thing about those apples are needed, but not just for the people on the ground, because what's happened, they're going to absorb into the soil, and then those nutrients go back into the trees, or somebody else takes it away. So I would actually say that there's nothing, that it's about the shift of resources. So I'm not saying biomimicry is everything, but it's about learning from other things. You're tapping in circular economy, you're looking into waste management. So one of the things is back to being this, looking at other disciplines. I'm spending a lot of time speaking to people saying, how do you design? I'm asking people who work in systems level at health, how do you look at solving a problem? Is there something we can get from how you look at it that we can use in the design sphere instead of design thinking going into medical applications?
Awesome. So as it is 42, we're going to pop up the Jamboard. I put the link in the YouTube live chat, and it's also but yeah, Richard, if you want to stay on, you're welcome to hang out while we're doing this Jamboard. That'd be kind of fun. So
yeah, and Gary, if you're listening to the live stream, hop back in. Let's look at the Jamboard together. It'll be fun.
Yep, we're going to be going through the Jamboard together. So here we are on the first slide, and people will be joining that Jamboard link. So Jamboard's pretty fun just to walk through while people are joining. This left sticky note slide, or sticky note button, is where you can go to a slide like, what is your intention today? That's slide 2. And then you can add a sticky note. And so we have it indicated here, add a sticky note, and we can add an intention. So we hope that everyone who's live will join on in to this Jamboard, and then we can sort of watch as people are incrementing, a little bit of stigmergy, a little bit of feedback, and we can hear from everybody's perspective and also create this artifact, welcome Kyrie, that is reflecting how we felt in the moment, because again, in the spirit of including everyone across time zones, this is really early for some people, or it's really late. It's all good. So we surface the tip of the iceberg with this opening live stream. We welcome everybody. We feature our facilitators. We have them share a little bit about their perspective, about the kind of interactive sessions that you can look forward to in the rest of the gather only part of the conversations that we're about to be having. And yes, so this will be a great Jamboard. Maybe Kyrie.
I feel like it's your first Complexity Weekend event. Like, what was the process of preparing for it? What are your intentions? Like, what are you excited about?
I'm pretty excited about the facilitated session. So learning in an interactive way, because I read about complexity science online, but I think really jumping into it and getting my hands wet, and then seeing what other people can brainstorm with regards to my field, I think is really exciting.
Cool. And it's so fun how complexity, it's a lifelong practice for all of us. Like Richard mentioned, how it's important to be interdisciplinary. But if we wait until we have 5 years of experience in every field, we're going to be 500 years old before we've even, moved one sunflower. So we need to start with a team focus and a community focus. And Kyrie, with such experience in physical infrastructure and network thinking, And then it's like that's your thread and perspective, and it just merges in. And so we build on each other, and we try to include across people who have been working within complexity or systems for a long time, but whether or not they called it by that word, it's all good.
Richard, what about you? What about just intentions or thoughts going into kind of the experience today? You might be muted, Richard.
Yeah, I was trying to get access to the Jamboard. Yeah, I'm just hoping to people really just keep bouncing ideas off each other. I'm hoping some of the teams from last year will join and hopefully attract some other people that they've maybe got a skill set that they're missing or push them a different direction.
Cool. Yep.
And I might just go at the moment and go get a picture for behind me because it's out of balance at the moment. If we had 3 of us, then we could have it with a different. But yeah, there's no balance to the system here.
Dan, I did change the permissions on the Jamboard, so people can now join.
Oh, classic. Very nice. Oh, there we go. All right. Thank you. Yep. I knew there was a bunch of people watching there. So there we go. Now they flood in. Yep. Fun times. You know, it is what it is. We're in the complexity of working together with these new affordances and challenges, and so this is what's exciting to learn by doing, because again, organization is just a role. It's like the organizers, the facilitators, the participants, they're really just showing up in a different way. It's not a higher or a lower way. A participant might be very busy with their own work and life, and then Saturday morning the Heartbeat comes around and they know that there's going to be a calendar event. They can jump into a live stream, jump into a cool conversation with someone from around the world. So that's the sort of participants' experience of a Heartbeat. And for a weekend, we actually engage a lot more leading up to the weekend. So I know with a Heartbeat, it's like, where's the calendar event? Or is Gather going to work on my computer? Or are the windows going to be up? Leading up to a weekend, we have a much longer phase with a lot of drop-in time to get to know each other. So a weekend is kind of just like a scaled up, more is different idea of a Heartbeat. And so this is sort of like the appetizer, and the intentions that we bring to the Heartbeat are often the same intentions that we bring to every day, because complexity is an approach. It's not just like a little calendar event that we block off, especially when we're hearing from so many different career stages and sectors and different ways that people are approaching it. So let's just remember that intention is very important, and that the organizers really set their intention through the beginning slides. Let's go to slide 3, and let's talk about who we are and how we discovered complexity. So anybody who wants to maybe Kyrie, and then Richard, then Sean. I'm actually quite curious.
Yeah, I think I did hear about the concept of complexity through some colleagues at the university, studying basically how bees get together to work towards a common goal. Like they can actually heat or cool their hive dynamically by flapping their wings at a certain speed. And so that fascinated me, because I was thinking, wow, how on earth did they learn that? And I sort of, after Sean was telling me about Complexity Weekend, I sort of made the connection with energy. Wow, we're moving to this distributed energy system. Everybody's having their own solar panels, their own batteries. There's no longer going to be a centralized entity that's controlling everything. So could we apply some of the same ideas towards energy and help the system be this harmonious power grid?
Very cool.
Very cool. Richard, then Sean.
Yeah, I ran downstairs to get a picture, but it's a butterfly, hence why I'm out of breath.
Nice.
I discovered complexity from my grandfather, who used to work in kind of farming and ecology, and he used to teach me the importance of how things are linked, from the rainfall on the west coast of Scotland and how that would impact, and the water quality rolling down, and how actually when you come, there was a lot of changes there with wild salmon farming and mussel farming. And I'm pretending now not to catch my breath here about shape, but it kind of got me interested in this whole kind of thing of how things are interconnected. And I had a previous career working in real estate finance and development. You understand the changes that can impact across the whole system. And I'm one of those annoying people that thinks in systems and sees them all just by literally talking. So we can talk about this complex theory of from here to walk to the shop and how the interactions are changing. So for me, it's kind of, I find ways to get rid of complexity, because sometimes you can just start going.
Yes, agreed. Nice.
Yeah, because you're going to end up turning into basically, ever evolving fractal, can't you?
Yet you can go down every literal rabbit hole in the ground, and you're not moving closer to your mission or values or impact or service to these problems that you really motivated the discussion with. It wasn't biomimicry because the butterfly behind you is beautiful. I agree it is. You mentioned the actual ecological issues, and then we're going to use biomimicry as like this non-linear strategy, which might undertake many different kinds of expected and unexpected roles and people to actually be problem oriented. So that's just why it's so great to have you around. And Sean,
and that was great, because that's a blue morphle butterfly, and that's one of the examples of structural color. So you go down to the nanoscale and you're actually seeing the colors just the way that the light is refracting off the scales through different hierarchies.
That's awesome.
Yep. If you thought color was just a pigment, then there's a total other way of making color appear, and insects can do both. And there's other systems that even use both. So cool.
Nice. I actually put the orange Post-it. So my kind of experience, and Kyrie could probably test this because we were in some of the similar classes in college. We would listen to, for me in particular, like thermodynamics and statistical mechanics that the classes I was most into. But I have this habit where when, the lecturer is talking, I'll be thinking of the assumptions underlying everything. And then I'll get it stuck in my head that I don't know if the assumptions are right. And then I can't listen anymore to anything they're saying because I'm just like so fixated on this linearity assumption or this equilibrium assumption being not necessarily the case. And I'll start drawing on my paper, like, what would that mean if this assumption wasn't true? Like, what other areas of like thought is there? And I just kept doing it over and over and over again till I got to this point with science in general, where I was like I'm convinced there's other sides of it that are not really being pursued, that there's just kind of this common road everyone follows on the assumptions of like a lot of underlying a lot of the different scientific fields. And so then I kind of discovered SFI, some of their education materials, and I started to see, complexity is kind of this integrative approach that lets you, like you mentioned earlier, Dan, like explore the edges a little more. And it kind of, to me, it feels a little more realistic to fitting a lot of phenomena in reality where these assumptions falter that are so commonly applied in engineering disciplines and whatnot. So it was just, for me, it was just kind of a disenchantment with the normal approach, I guess, to science and feeling like there must be something else. That's kind of what got me into it.
Cool. And actually, it's a little similar. Sean, maybe you want to check the live chat, make sure everyone can see the Jamboard appropriately. It was actually a little similar, but Sean was coming from a thermo side, and I was coming from almost a biology side. And as I was learning more about the structure of education and of research, it's like we had all these Jenga towers, very precarious, very narrow, not connected, all right next to each other. These buildings from different disciplines or from different departments at a university, literally next to each other or even on the same floor without a productive, bi-directional and respectful dialogue. And so it's like, okay, we could stack more Jenga, get more precarious, more specialized, more jargon, more restrictive in the kinds of questions and the kinds of people we're including in our research program, or we could actually flesh this scaffold out and we could ask how biology and chemistry are sort of melding, and that would be called interdisciplinary within a discipline-centric framework. But just like Sean was saying, it's like, could there be another framework that actually prioritized that integrity and that multi-scale and multi-method approach instead of just going for the most thin and narrow Jenga tower of knowledge that could be built? And so it was about integrating and about perspectives that brought approaches and people to the table together for a productive conversation. And then also, as brought up, it's really the impact and the wanting to work on specific projects together. Yep. So it looks like not everyone could add Post-it notes.
We're killing it with the permissions on this doc. I just made it where everyone can edit. You can now add Post-it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to say something, but it's like stupid o'clock for you guys. So yeah.
Nice. Well, yeah. Go. Continue. Actually, let's go to the next one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So sorry about the adding permissions. So, now I hope people can maybe if they reload, or I'm not sure, but join on in. And we're on slide 4 now, which is, what is something that you're curious or wondering about? So either Kyrie or Richard. It could be about just totally...
complexity in general. I'm quite, and this is going to sound random, but I'm quite curious where WandaVision's going, because there's a great example of multi-layered storytelling.
I haven't watched
Is Vision?
Can you unpack that?
But so is Vision alive or dead? Obviously, that you know who's controlling what and how is it? Yeah. Anyway, no. One of the things that I'm quite curious about is that should we also be learning from science fiction?
Cool. And
because the reason being is a lot of them put a lot of effort into it, and I'm not just talking sci-fi and TV, but going into the a lot of the deep and dark novels that are out there. And I think there's a lot to be said by what's in there that actually can teach us about science, complexity, and actually future gazing.
Dan and I have had this conversation before about whether sci-fi is like a prediction to some degree or not.
And the question
it's not. Yeah.
I just put up there, are grants or proposals science fiction? Not to say that they're deceptive or a negative connotation of fictional, but it's like, it can't be said that a proposal for work that hasn't been done, it can't be said that's a measurement or a fact. It's a Word file or it's a PDF document, but it can't, it's perspective. Now, it's short-term, it's realist, it's within a budget and a time frame, it has additional constraints, but people write science fiction stories without the letter E or only in a certain governmental structure. So science fiction is already about using structure and constraints to discuss something that kind of diverges in a fundamental or potentially even a superficial way from what we already have around us today. So there's definitely this continuum with science fiction and even other modalities like art, and then verging into the actual scientific work that's like the next step ahead that we're going to take as teams. So it's a really awesome conversation. Kyrie?
I do actually agree with that. In the UK, Kyrie, in the UK, we've got certain research councils that if you're working in interdisciplinary, you can't get funded because you cross across the two. So if you're doing mechanical engineering, but you've got a lot about biology, they'll not like it as much. Or then they'll tell you to go to the other one. And then the other research councils for more focus on biological sciences will then say, oh, you got a little bit of engineering in there. So you kind of sit between them all and you have to float around, and you also have to compromise your research output to fit in their little, box.
Yep, we've heard it a lot that when people go interdisciplinary in the current paradigm, it's seen as exploratory or not supported, and then the interdisciplinary opportunities are scarce, and so it's basically an outsider narrative, so there's no correct slot to enter into.
Yeah, about the sci-fi thing, if you think about it, the production of sci-fi media actually influences society itself. Because a company might think, oh, I don't want to be like that Black Mirror episode, so I'm not going to create this product. So that's proof already that it does influence the way that the physical systems interact. And what I was going to say is I'm actually pretty interested in the interaction between societal systems and physical systems, because these two, especially, I think my vision is narrow in energy, but I'm expanding. But these two are so heavily intertwined in energy. The two systems impact each other. If humans change the way they use energy and create energy, it completely influences the environment. That influences every ecosystem. So that's that, crossing that boundary, and how do we model it and study it?
Very interesting. We talk about strange attractors, and with science fiction portending something that we might want to move towards or just something entertaining, but there's actually a negative, like a strange repulsor, where we could actually put out a negative example, like this is what a certain surveillance policy that we don't want to see would look like, and then now we can reference it, say, 1984 or something like that, and people understand that there's something that can be archetypally repelled. Let's also mention some of these awesome questions on here. One of the questions is, how feasible would it be, it's just something that someone's curious about, how feasible would it be to teach systems thinking and in turn complexity thinking and the complexity perspective in high school, and really for all ages? Rationale is being a domain-specific skill facilitating education broadly. So this is kind of like have a complexity primer across ages that would catalyze people across domains. What does that raise up in any of you.
Let me hop in real quick because Dan, you brought this up before, and I think it's such a fascinating perspective. The structure of our schooling into departments, into math class, then science class, like it almost structurally rigs a system against complexity thinking in a sense where it's like your whole upbringing and education is compartmentalizing knowledge and really not looking at the edges between them, unless you have maybe project-based learning or some other styles that are not the mainstream style of learning. And then you get to college, right? And it's like, here's Department of Chemistry, Department of Physics, right? And it's like, how do you get away from that, taking the edges totally off the table where you can't even explore them anymore?
Cool. And then another application question is, how can we best apply complexity science to rein public policy back from extremism? So how do we come to the table and make shared policies that are co-optimizing all of these very nuanced and often seemingly contradictory features like uncertainty or short-term success versus long-term resilience? All these different dynamics might be opposed within one paradigm, but in systems or in complexity, we can have a yes and try to figure out some interesting way to make it work. And if not, by at least thinking it's possible, we're not going to make it happen. Should we go to slide 5?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So slide 5. This is fun. And thanks also, Richard and Kyrie, because, we didn't expect this. It's actually our first time with going through the Jamboard with, our featured facilitators, but this is super fun. So I hope that we can have this and also a participant, potentially even for next February. Just come on and just, give us the live and we'll type down the post-its for you. So slide 5, Jamboard slide 5. What is a cool complexity concept? How would you like to teach it? And then we kind of have a little bit of a bid ask type side for right side and left side. So on one side, what is something that you're excited to share about? And then on the right side is more, what is something you're curious about and would like to learn more about?
I think you could tie both of them together. There's a brilliant education guy. He runs a non-profit in the UK called Burning to Learn, and he works with disadvantaged youths. And he will take them to, he's managed to get contact, say, with Formula One teams or sports clubs. And he will take them in, and some of them say, I want to work in skincare. What's that got to do with Formula One? But then you see the masseuse, you see all the people working around that, the branding people. So then you start breaking down all the different jobs that go into running the Formula One team or the soccer club. And you realize that everyone's got a role to play, part of the system, even down to kind of, the statistics of kind of like, the US-based people, kind of the Moneyball kind of thing of transfers, the mathematics, computer science, nutrition, sports. Everything is kind of, you got all this interlinkages there, and actually you can teach that in school because it's something everybody knows about. Even start breaking it down into, think about a toy and exploring that by breaking it apart and thinking about where the materials come from. And then you can start thinking that way. One of the things we've been looking at is getting kids to understand where food comes from, because a lot of kids still think that milk just comes from a shop. No, in some inner city places they do, or not knowing, and those kind of things, and the expense of actually growing food and where it comes from, the fact that most countries are net importers and exporters.
And to actually tie that to complexity as touching everything, but we don't want to get lost in it. Let's say someone goes, well, everyone knows that milk doesn't come from the store, it comes from a cow. And then someone says, well, where does the energy in a cow? Doesn't milk come from the sun? Doesn't milk come from the Big Bang? It's like, when are you going to stop? And that is where the values and the problem. You go, okay, I'm curious about milk and how it touches on everything, but actually the reality is some people have too much milk, some people have not enough milk, so there's milk spoiling, and there's some people who need milk. What's the logistical strategy? What is the repertoire of metaphors? What are the specific approaches we're going to take to help that milk distribution? And along the way, we're going to come up with so much fun thinking about milk, but we don't need to wait until we understand the milk network before we actually work on some of these strategies. Sean?
So I just railed a little bit against like linear thinking and equilibrium thinking and like, but really what's good about when it works in modeling is when you have everything connected to everything. Everything's a big hairball network if you really consider every infinitesimal, connection between things. But at some point you can take some of those edges and kind of approximate them as negligible compared to others and actually make something manageable. And I think that is when these types of thinking are really handy, and you can kind of cut some things out, say let's not consider Jupiter's gravitational effect on, this cow producing milk, like you can do some of that effectively, and that's really great. It's just when we over apply it is what I rail against it.
Nice.
The proof in the pudding is if you're actually presenting that to, say, a client and it doesn't make sense. It's got to be something, if you've got deadlines, and it's very much, if you think in the startup kind of mindset, that you iterate as you go and keep presenting it. So that will give you a kind of mindset, or stage gating it to keep going, so you don't get lost, because you would end up just, the only person getting useful for that is scribbling on your walls when you're in a padded cell.
I like this
at
one.
Mar-a-Lago.
Where at whatever island of our choice. This one here.
Yes.
The concept that people hold deeply rooted perceptions that they can't even articulate well, even when asked directly, fascinates me in my business career. Discovering what people really think versus what they say they think is the difference between success and failure. That really reminds me a lot of what Denise and her colleagues were talking about with what is water. And what are those assumptions and those axioms that truly guide the way that we operate in our niche as biological systems? Yes, biological systems with technology and power grids and social connectivity, but nonetheless biological systems. So this what is water question is a social as well as physical and conceptual. So this is really important, because one person, we're all in our different tide pools with complexity. Each of us in our day-to-day life, we're not in a complexity weekend commune, right? Everybody's in their own different water. And then complexity weekend is when we come together and we're like, whoa, by system, this person has done this. I didn't even know that was an opportunity, or I didn't realize that my understanding of complexity was this. So by coming into juxtaposition and conversation and interactive sessions with other people who also have similar impulses, curiosity, values, we see our water in a whole new way. Because it's really one thing to think about interdisciplinary work. For 50 years, you could write a book, you could study 100 books, but then you have one conversation and you hear something from somebody who's younger or has a different experience, and it just blows the lid open. And so that's what's so fun about complexity.
Kyrie, I'd love to hear anything you see that's kind of calling out to you.
No, this one that we were just talking about, the idea that people can't articulate what they're thinking because our brains are so complex and our language is in some manners simplistic. And that's why we use things like metaphors, because we have a hard time articulating certain feelings. And you see this happen in energy all the time when we ask people, would you be willing to be slightly uncomfortable to save energy or to, offset this coal plant turning on? And in the surveys, people say, oh yeah, absolutely. I care about the environment. When it comes down to changing these ingrained behaviors that we've had, I want my internet when I want it. I want my house to be cold when I want it. It's really, really challenging. And so, yeah, that like mapping people's thoughts and desires, which sometimes they don't even have a good handle on, into how we control and build these physical systems is something that really interests me.
This is awesome discussion. So let's go to number 6. Let's keep on walking through the Jamboard. So here on slide Jamboard 6, we see the question: what kinds of participant behaviors and norms can help us make Complexity Weekend an amazing space and community of practice? So this is kind of like the science fiction. There's the attractor and then there's the repulsor. And we're not passing judgment unduly on the moment by laying out things that we do and don't want to see in the future. So this is like science fiction. It's like Complexity Weekend fiction, but reality. Because in science fiction, usually gravity is still there. Like there's elements of reality. So these are things that we are seeing around us, like gravity, but they're things that we want to highlight, like people taking a lot of breaks. So for example, we have specific breaks in the program, but then even beyond that, people can just drop out of whatever, and it's going to be all good. So hopefully that's something that we do want to see, is that health being balanced. Everyone is in a different situation with their needs locally and bodily. So how to keep the health balance. We have things we want to avoid. So while people are adding to slide 6, Kyrie or Richard, what's something that you've seen maybe work in other communities or other experiences that you'd like to kind of port into Complexity Weekend?
I just added a Post-it note. I'm not sure which site it should go on, but the no question is a stupid question. I think this is a really healthy attitude. people, especially those new to complexity science like me, might be afraid of asking a stupid question, but it's really no judgment zone.
I agree. That's really, oh, did it just disappear? Oh, I think I just made it so it's a little more clear, a little more carrot in the stick. It's we're not telling normatively how people should feel about the thing, but we want to cultivate an atmosphere where every question is the right one, every degree of participation is the right one, because again, it's the beginner's question and perspective or someone's lived experience that can totally innovate and rethink something. And so if the question is emerging in you in response to something you're hearing, whether it's, wait, can you just, what is this variable in this equation? Or I didn't hear that last word just because the audio cut out. So it doesn't have, it's not a judgment. It just, if the question is arising, that's the special question to ask. And that is how we can take advantage of everyone's perspective. And instead of just like, either you do or you don't get it, you're in the club, you're out of the club, you're participating, so you're in the community. And then the questions are like a gift that everyone, including the beginners, can be providing to everyone else. Because even as facilitators and organizers, I think we can all honestly say that it's probably some of our most favorite moments when people who are curious ask questions.
Yeah, and I think local perspectives as well. So we've been working on a project, and you say the important, back to that water, you were talking about, metaphor of water, actual water. How's the importance of water and energy in America and the UK compared to, say, India? So imagine if you're doing a water cleanup project and you're focusing on the Ganges versus, say, the Mississippi. What's the big thing with the Ganges? It's religion and faith. That's not got as much of importance in the US or the UK, but so you're tying those different perspectives and learning from the locals as well. And that allows you to understand different things, or different ways that people, I'll give you a weird thing. We're currently going on a project in Nepal, and we're researching hundreds of different ways of using cow pee. Yes, cow pee. People even drink it. I don't recommend drinking it myself, but there's all these things of tying in what is kind of ways people do things. But we're actually looking at it as a bigger thing for bioeconomy and how you can then build through the systems. One of the key things as well is bringing somebody in who's not seen it before, just somebody to look at it differently. It's like that whole joke about Colgate, and they were spending months and months and hired all the top designers how to sell more product. And then the tea lady came in, turned around, put all the teacups down and went, make the hole bigger. And that was it. It's that kind of thing,
And actually, that reminds me of something that Sean taught me, drawing from your entrepreneurship background, which was really learning for me as an academic background, was getting the people on the phone early, the stakeholders. You said, if you're going to be making the nurse's product, then by the end of the weekend, let's schedule a phone call or connect through the network. If you don't have someone in the network, you can find a group on social media, or you can ask the organizers or somebody. It's going to be possible to make that conversation happen. So get in a zone where you want to have that stakeholder conversation happen, and actually the inclusion on the team from the incipient project. And that was really something that was, as an academic, was like, whoa, including everyone on the project from the very beginning, because it's their questions that matter, was just something that was pretty interesting. Yeah, what do you say about that, Sean?
The best way I like to hear about or think about startups is like they're an R&D firm where their research development is focused on finding product market fit. And then once they find it, they're no longer a startup, they're a business, which is more operational. And you already know your product market fit. You're just trying to operationalize it now and scale up and whatnot. And the approach I really enjoy when people are doing kind of startup level activity is you basically rank your riskiest assumptions. You're like, if I'm going to really do this river cleanup project, right? Like, what are the things that are really going to tank this venture? Like, and that goes up to the very top. If it's like the government's not going to let me do it, that's maybe number one. And then number two, it might be this technology doesn't work. Rank them all in terms of the order in which they're going to totally tank what you're trying to do. And then you need to go run experiments to basically verify the topmost one and the second one and the third one, because you want that information as soon as possible. If what you're trying to do is not going to work, you want to know that as soon as possible so you can work on other things or whatnot.
Cool. Let's keep moving. I like this weird flexes on things we want to avoid. I don't even know what that would be, but I can kind of imagine it evokes something fun. So let's go to slide 7 on the Jamboard. So this is, again, a sort of like give and ask slide. On the left side, it says, I can give put individual or team contact info. It could be just like an anonymous posting, like, Craigslist, missed encounters, or it could be, I'm actually giving this specifically. Here is my, contact information or name if you want to, and then what you're looking for. And so this could be like a team. So we're actually looking for somebody with database, or we're looking with somebody with design experience. And then this is seen and focused upon by those who are coming from wherever in their complexity perspective. So it's often a fun give and ask and looking for situation, because you connect with people on sometimes the bigger narrative first, and then you understand how to drop into the specifics. Whereas I'm sure as complexity thinkers, we've all been in situations where like we didn't even know where to begin with moving from linear thinking to systems thinking. And then it's like, do you operate within a paradigm of linear thinking and always bringing up these, but then this could actually be conditional on that, and this other third thing's going to happen? That's just going to be overwhelming. Or do you actually make the transition to the complexity thinking, which might as well be called simplicity thinking in some situations? How do we actually come back to the first principles? So anyways, I think this is really fun. What would you put on either side here?
I love the nurse dialogue going on here. In general, any stakeholder calls, reach out to me. I will make it happen. That's so important to me that teams talk to stakeholders.
Yep. It's almost like if it was studying for a test, it's like finding out about what is going to be asked would make your studying 100 times more effective. So the way Sean just framed it with the startup and the team is about the information channels, the narrative, an understanding of the problem, about what kinds of approaches might even be partially plausible, let alone effective. And then it converts, once there's an approach, into like an organizing team, like a business operation. And so getting those reach outs early is just something that, and looking at what other fields have done, it's kind of the same thing. It's like asking the literature. Nice. Look, this is pretty nice to see also. Lots of people want to give.
So James Dyson did with the vacuum cleaners, bagless. He looked at other industries. So the bagless vacuum cleaner came with it was basically from a factory, a farm that was sucking up wood pellets for biomass burner.
Interesting. I'm going to add one for.
So it is this kind of thing. So it's looking across multiple disciplines. Studying everything, anything, even nurses. I don't know who's going down that route, but yeah, I mean, it's a key thing. Is like one of the things as a grant in the UK you can get, I'm sure, anywhere in the world, and you're basically paid by a research council to go travel around the world, probably on Zoom at the moment, to speak to 50 business people to ask them their opinions. When you should aim for at least 50, just talk to people. And then the key thing is that allows you not to fall in love with your prototype. If you fall in love with your prototype, you're screwed, because you will think it's perfect and you won't rip it apart.
It's like the ant colony locking into the nest architecture at one day, and then it rains or the changes are different. You need to change the architecture and change your interactions as well. This is let's just highlight some of these on here. So on the giving side, we have everything from expertise and brainstorming and problem solving effort. And then on the looking for side, we have awesome with a specific Keybase name, looking for business or politics projects, something definitely a lot of people are working on. This is a shameless self post-it note for us, which is we're always looking for co-organizers, but really specifically for these February, March, April heartbeats, which entails 4 weekly meetings of 1 hour, showing up live for this live stream in the event, doing a little async work, helping us, just talking to us, hanging out. So that's one thing. Exposure for my future book. We hope, and that would be the thing, is later today, in literally, an hour or two, we're going to be having spotlight talks. We already have 2 RSVPs for the spotlight talk, but if we have extra time, we always can just ask around. So we hope that by bringing the structure as organizers, getting the gather space, getting the RSVP, incorporating people's feedback, including co-organizers, then yes, when there's a moment where somebody says, I actually have something I'm just wondering about. I'm not ready to do a full presentation, or I don't want to facilitate a live session. I just want to give a 30-second heads up at an event with 50 or with 100 cool complexity people, and then I want to pop back down for another few months. And you never know what can happen when you signal your interest in project and also your commitment to being brave and doing these kinds of fun events. Sean?
How do you want to do this as far as we have a few more slides on the Jamboard, but we also have Kyrie's time coming up to talk on the live stream? How do you want to do that?
Here's what the final slides are. I'm going to show you, Kyrie, and then you decide what you want to do. We can walk through them, or you can, weave it in. So slide 8 is from our previous awesome facilitator, and she'll be around again for May 2021, Monica Kang. Who's really given us some great tips on online collaboration and effective working. Slide 9 is about complexity and impact. Slide 10 is about if you're looking for team members. Slide 11 is just that we'll meet and gather. And then we were planning to have Kyrie join at 7:15, but we're so happy that you didn't do that. So, Kyrie.
Yeah, part of what I was going to talk about is related to slide 9.
Let's continue.
And I actually prepared some slides. I don't know if that's okay.
Yes.
Share if you'd like.
So,
okay.
If you share. Yes. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, just because it's easier to have a visual here. And please feel free to interrupt with questions or.
Cool. So we're going to have slide 9 up, and then we're going to hear your slides, Kyrie, and then in the session, it'll be like interactive talking about this.
Exactly. Yeah.
Perfect. That's awesome.
So I just wanted to give a little bit of a background in power grids, because people typically think of them, as just these huge wires and power plants that supply us with energy, but it's actually a really, really complex system that goes into so many layers. So the analogy I'm going to make here is that we're going from an orchestra to a jam band. And so if you're not familiar with the power grid, it's an extremely complex system. It interconnects continents, it interconnects countries, states. The U.S. Academy of Engineering ranks electric power as the #1 greatest engineering achievement of the 20th century. And this is because without power, we wouldn't have internet, we wouldn't have electric vehicles, we wouldn't have indoor lighting, heating, cooling, a lot of the things that have improved our quality of life. So on the left here, you can just see all of the large power lines. In the electric power grid, you can see they're sort of concentrated in areas with high population centers. And then you can see over here on the right, the power generators that are both renewable and non-renewable that are scattered throughout the US. And this mix is totally changing over time. But everything here is interconnected. And it's also interconnected with Mexico and Canada, although that's not shown here. So the grid is working on this sub-second level where it has to balance supply and demand at all times. Otherwise, bad things happen. So a lot of things have to happen in order for this to be successful. So on the top here, we sort of have the traditional, the traditional way things were built in the power grid for the past 100 years or so. We have these large power plants over here. We step up the voltage for high voltage transmission. We get these large power lines. You might have factories or manufacturing facilities connected to those large power lines. We step down the voltage, and then we deliver the power to individual consumers. And here's us over here with this 120 volt service. In the UK, it's a slightly different voltage, but roughly the same ballpark. So this is hundreds of miles of infrastructure, millions of participants, people playing with this scale on a sub-second level, and the grid has to maintain this supply and demand. And the system frequency you see here is because we have AC power in the grid, so that varies with time. And if you don't have supply and demand balance, then we get these frequency fluctuations. So typically, the grid side sort of took care of this. They would make adjustments to their power in order to maintain supply and demand. But now we're seeing a lot of customers that are actually interacting as agents in the system, either with solar, with changing when and how they use electricity, charging EVs, participating in electricity markets. And so we're really getting this blend between supply and demand that's merging. And so when the grid was first built, roughly in the 1870s to present, this is what I call the orchestra. And so the orchestra is we have these centralized entities, and you can see some of them here in the grid with these white circles, these centralized entities that are responsible for maintaining this balance between supply and demand. And they're responsible for essentially delivering power to consumers at economic rates, ensuring that we have reliability, ensuring that the grid can withstand outages, and pursuing safety. Because if we have a huge blackout, we saw this in August in California last year, when it's really, really hot and the grid might have to cut power because they just don't have enough power plants, that can actually be, that can actually cause people to die. And that happened in 2003 in Europe. I think thousands of people died during a blackout. So it's not just a matter of an inconvenience, not having lights, not having internet. It's also a matter of life and death. So what's going on here? We have this centralized person conducting all of these entities, all of these power plants, all these transformers, all these switching stations to work together at a rate of 60 hertz in order to make the grid happen. And when you have a frequency fluctuation in one part of the grid, it actually does ripple extremely quickly to other parts of the grid. So this needs to happen, the synchronicity needs to happen very, very quickly. And so what's going on right now, we're experiencing this huge transition to what I call the jam band. So jam bands don't have a coordinator necessarily, they don't have a conductor. You kind of get your guitar, get your drums, get your bass, and you start jamming. And eventually everyone in the band gets this groove going on where they're playing well together. They're, finding a sound that works. They're synchronizing and they're collaborating. And so what's happening in the US is we're getting these really rapid installations of what's called distributed energy resources. So this could be rooftop solar, it could be a Tesla Powerwall, a home battery, it could be you installing a switch on your air conditioner that allows it to shift when it turns on and off. It could be a Nest thermostat. And so you can see that this is projected to increase significantly all these distributed energy resources across time. And this also includes subsystems that can disconnect, like microgrids. So the grid is getting a lot more complex than it once was. And here's me in a jam band back a few years ago. And we tried to find this, this sound that allowed us to work together, just like all these small solar panels, batteries, large generators are trying to find this groove that allows them to work together. So there's a problem here, and this is what got me interested in complexity. Coordinating such a large, complex system that used to have this, conductor is a really, really challenging problem. And over here, I just put this, one of my favorite Kiss songs, Beth, is the band is practicing and they're really trying to find the groove. They're trying to work together, but they're having a really, really hard time. They also have these external pressures from, this guy's wife, Beth, to come home and to stop working together. And so you might think, who cares? This is just small rooftop solar. You can get this and you don't have to have the grid interact with it at all. But there is a big problem. And if you've done any reading about solar energy, you've probably heard about this problem. And the problem is with ducts. So what do I mean by that? So let's take a look at two situations here. One of them on the left is Kauai in Hawaii, and the one on the right is California. And so this is a daily, what's called net demand profile. So on the y-axis, this is the power that people are consuming. You can see as people get up in the morning, they start turning on devices. We get this increase in power consumption. They're, turning on computers, lighting, TV. And then in the middle of the day, we have solar production. And these are two states with a huge amount of installed solar. So the net demand that the rest of the grid has to account for is this sagging line right here. And so when the sun sets, we see a peak in what the grid has to provide again. And if we draw a picture here, we see that this looks sort of like a duck. And so you see the same thing happening in California. We get this really saggy duck belly. And so what's the problem with this? The problem is that a lot of the grids don't have visibility into a lot of these small distributed solar. They just have to deal with the fact that there's going to be this huge production in the middle of the day. And so power plants, these old traditional coal power plants, nuclear, some gas, will have to produce electricity at the flat rate that they're roughly used to that doesn't vary a lot. And then they'll have to ramp down really quickly. And some will even have to shut off in the middle of the day. And then they'll have to ramp up really quickly at the end of the day. And these power plants are old. A lot of them, like nuclear, takes 3 days to turn on or off. So we can't just turn them on and off willy-nilly, ramp them up and down to account for the solar. So a lot of these little guys built up to make a big problem for the bigger guys. And so what we're transitioning to is sort of these big utilities are realizing, wow, even at the level of a single electric vehicle, a single solar panel, or a single water heater, we need coordination. We need everybody to automatically sync together to maintain frequency at 60 hertz, to maintain reliability, to avoid blackouts. And you saw this again in August with California. The governor tweeted, "Hey, can everybody adjust your thermostat set point slightly to avoid a blackout?" And so this coordination needs to start transcending, this manual conductor and start moving towards a more coordinated, synchronized system.
Wow, Kyrie, thank you very
That's
much.
my spiel for energy.
That was Science Memes Live with a duck plot, but it was an example of nonlinear thinking and so many other attributes. So yes, big applause for the talk. And that actually brings us to 7:30 a.m. Pacific. And so rather than talk too much more on stream, I'm bringing the slides up to cover our Jitsi face. And basically, here we are at the end of our live stream with Kyrie. So thanks everyone, and thanks Richard and Kyrie. In the future, I think we'll welcome everybody to be on this stream more like a larger panel rather than the in and out, or it's up to people. We're gonna have a 5-minute break, so take a little rest or whatever you need to do, and then we're gonna meet you in the gather space. So in the program, that's where you can go, and it's a link that's in the URL for the live session room. And then 7:35 to 8 a.m. Pacific up in the room to the north. So just walk through those doors. That's going to be the interactive session with Kyrie. Then in that same room from 9 to 10, there'll be a session with Richard. Kyrie's office hours will be from 9 to 10 in somewhere. We'll clarify that. At 10 a.m., so between now and 10 a.m. Pacific, we're going to be just chilling, going to these interactive sessions if you want. Some people will just be joining in who will have watched the live stream in replay. And then at 10 a.m., we're going to bring our attention back to the center of the room for a couple of spotlight talks. So that's going to be really exciting. Then again, 10:30 to 11:50, there'll be office hours, a poster session, and a chance to just hang out with the Heartbeat organizers, especially if you want to get involved. We'll have a brief note of closure at 11:50 a.m. And then at noon, the party doesn't stop. So we'll just continue hanging out and gather. Any last notes there, Sean?
I think the only thing I'll say is everything in here is opt-in, right? Like definitely Kyrie and Richard have put a lot of thought into these sessions. So do show up and participate fully while there. But also in the background, we're just going to be co-working. We're just going to be in that space, interacting, having great conversation, going around these little co-working spots, which Dan can designate for your team if you'd like to claim one, and just sit in there. You can work, you can throw ideas past each other. Let's just have a lot of fun with that as the backdrop. And this space never goes down. So if you want to have team meetings in this gather space, it's the same space used every single month for our community. And I know Dan and I, we popped in because we do our Complexity Weekend meetings in the space. People will be in there sometimes. It's just fun to kind of collide with people.
Yep. And we're going to use that a lot leading up to the May 2021 weekend, but more to be revealed there later. So Kyrie and Richard, thanks so much. And we're all looking forward to your sessions. Really deeply appreciated. And everybody who's watching live or in replay, thanks for being a part of the Complexity Weekend community of practice. Really means a lot to us. So we'll talk to you soon. We'll see you on Gather in a couple of minutes. Bye.
Jazz hands. Woo.